Stefon Diggs went on Fox 5 DC and said with his own mouth he is working through some things with the Commanders. The receiver with the highest catch rate on short passes in the entire NFL wants to play in Ashburn, and in a minute I am going to tell you exactly why Adam Peters cannot let this slip away, but also why there is one very specific reason to pump the brakes before you start celebrating. While that story is developing, Josh Conerly Jr. showed up to minicamp looking physically different. The tackle who gave us nightmares in the first half of last season has something to prove, and the second half numbers tell a story nobody in the DMV is talking about, but there is one condition he has to meet before August for this offensive line to be for real. And Dan Quinn, who never talks like this about a rookie, just compared Sonny Styles directly to Jaden Daniels. Not a reporter, not somebody on social media, the head coach. At minicamp, I am going to show you exactly what he said and why that comparison might be the most important signal to come out of Ashburn in years, or the quote that haunts Quinn the most if he is wrong. Raise hail. Let's get into it. Okay. Stop what you're doing. Stefon Diggs, 8-time Pro Bowl receiver, the man who caught 85 balls, went over 1,000 yards, 4 touchdowns, and posted an 83.3% catch rate last season in New England, doing all of that on just 55% of the offensive snaps. That man appeared on Fox 5 DC today and said he's kind of figuring it out, working through some things with the Washington Commanders. Direct quote. And in the same run of media appearances, he confirmed he has a lot of hopes of making this happen. This isn't a rumor from an insider. This is Diggs speaking directly to the Washington audience, on camera, on record. And before anyone dismisses this because he's 32, because of what went down in Buffalo, because the Patriots released him, let me be very clear about something. Stefon Diggs played in Super Bowl 60. He helped Drake May become one of the most dominant quarterbacks in the AFC last season, on 55% of the offensive snaps. Not 80, not 90, 55, and still 1,013 yards. That is not a receiver who is finished. That's a receiver managing his body with precision and still being a legitimate problem when used correctly. Now I need to put him in historical context because I want y'all to understand exactly what would be walking through that door in Ashburn if Peters makes this call. Diggs has 11 seasons in the NFL, 7 of them with over 1,000 yards. 7. In the history of this league, there's a small group of receivers who've done that, and most of them either have a gold jacket already or are getting one. That level of consistency across a career doesn't happen by accident. That's craft. That's a football IQ that doesn't deteriorate with age the way pure speed does. And the recent evidence in the 89% catch rate on short passes according to Mina Kimes on ESPN, third in yards per route, run behind only Puka Nacua and Christian McCaffrey, says that craft is fully intact right now. Let me talk about what I think is actually the most important analysis in this whole story. The tactical fit with the system David Blau is going to run in Washington in 2026. Blau comes in as offensive coordinator from Los Angeles, where he was part of a staff that built one of the most sophisticated passing attacks in the NFC. The kind of offense Blau understands and has implemented runs on horizontal spacing concepts, crossing routes, RPOs, and quick options for the quarterback. The idea is that your QB never has to process for 7 seconds because the scheme gets him the ball fast when the defense makes a mistake. For that to work, you need receivers who run their routes on a precise clock, who locate themselves in the right zone holes, and who catch what's thrown to them, not guys depending entirely on speed separation. Guys who understand the game. Who fits that perfectly? Stefon Diggs. And I'm not saying that because he's the most marketable available option. I'm saying it because in New England last year, Diggs was exactly that piece. The quick release valve, the reliable third down option, the slot target May found when the first read closed. Drake May became elite last year, partly because he had someone he could trust when the pressure arrived. Jaden Daniels needs exactly that same thing, not just McLaurin as a #1 option. He needs someone who converts 3rd and 8 into 1st and 10 on a consistent basis, and Daniels hasn't had that consistently yet. Think about it. In 2024, Daniels won Offensive Rookie of the Year with a receiving core that was, honestly, weak in depth beyond McLaurin. Terry was the elite weapon, and the rest was a patchwork of system players. That worked because Daniels is so gifted with his legs that he can manufacture plays from nothing. But in the modern NFL, a quarterback who's only truly effective when improvising is a quarterback with a ceiling. Daniels needs to elevate his pocket reads and pocket passing, and to do that, he needs receivers who do their job when the first down is already drawn in the script. Diggs is that player. Now, the uncomfortable part, the legal situation. I'm not going to skip this because it exists, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise just to sell the homecoming narrative. Diggs went to trial in Massachusetts on charges of strangulation and assault involving his personal chef. He was acquitted. The NFL investigated under its personal conduct policy and found insufficient evidence to discipline him. That's the legal record. But here's my honest take. The fact that it got to trial is something Adam Peters had to work through with the legal team, with ownership, with the locker room leadership. Not because Diggs is guilty. He was found not guilty, but because any situation that reaches a courtroom has to be evaluated as part of a character assessment in a franchise that's trying to build something lasting. Peters is a meticulous GM. He's not signing anyone without doing that due diligence fully. What tells me the evaluation is moving forward positively is the fact that the NFL itself closed the case. That is the most significant institutional signal a team can have. And if Diggs himself is out here in the DMV doing foundation events, going on local television, and telling the Washington audience he's working something out with the Commanders, that doesn't sound like a man who expects to be rejected. That sounds like someone who's already had conversations, knows interest is real, and is letting the negotiation close naturally. The time pressure is real though. The Raiders are also in the conversation on Diggs. Las Vegas has urgent receiver need. If Washington moves slowly and Las Vegas puts a clean offer on the table this week, Diggs goes to the AFC West, and we're looking at our receiving core with an honest sense of dread about what happens in January when this team needs a receiver to win a playoff game. That cannot happen. My final take, sign Diggs. Not because he's a perfect option. There's no perfect option in June. Sign him because the risk of not doing it, walking into 2026 without a reliable second weapon for Jayden Daniels in third down situations, is a risk that this team literally cannot afford during the window they have right now. The contention window with Jayden on a rookie deal is today. Not 2 years from now, today. Every decision that reduces the chances of winning this year is a decision Peters is going to have to defend in January. Bring him to the DMV. Let Jayden find him on 3rd and 5. The catch rate speaks for itself, bro. And while the Diggs situation plays out, there's a conversation about Josh CONERLY Jr. that I genuinely believe matters more to this season's actual ceiling than almost anything else we discuss all summer. CONERLY was the 29th pick in the 2025 draft. First round, Oregon. He came to Washington as a core piece of Adam Peters' plan to build a fortress in front of Jayden Daniels. Laramie Tunsil on the left side, CONERLY anchoring the right. The plan made sense on paper. Year 1 execution was painful. His PFF overall grade for the full season was 59.9. For context, in PFF's grading system, 60 is basically the line between below average and average at the NFL level. A 59.9 on a first-round tackle is the kind of number that gives every critic full ammunition to say he wasn't ready. The Commanders finished 5-12. The offensive line was a mess in the first half of the year, and CONERLY'S face was on that failure. The miserable first-round pick headlines were easy to write, but here's the analysis that those headlines don't do. In his first 4 games in the NFL, Josh CONERLY Jr. faced Abdul Carter, Micah Parsons, Max Crosby, and Jalen Walker 4 consecutive weeks. Carter was the 3rd overall pick of the 2025 draft and arrived with physical traits scouts described as generational for an edge rusher. Parsons is a 2-time Pro Bowler and has been the best edge rusher in the NFC East for 3 straight years. Crosby has been a top 5 pass rusher in the NFL for 4 seasons. Walker came out of Georgia as a first-round pick with the best explosiveness metrics among defensive ends in years. That's what they lined up against a 21-year-old tackle in his first 4 professional football games. No warm-up games, no soft opponent to find your footing, straight to the fire. And people are citing the full season 59.9 grade as the definition of who this player is. That's not analysis. That's selecting the number that fits the narrative. Because from week 9 through the end of the regular season, CONERLY'S PFF grade was 71.6. That puts him just outside the top 30 qualified tackles in the league for the second half of the year. 2 sacks allowed in 9 weeks. In the final 4 games of the season, when the schedule got manageable and the line around him had stabilized with Quinn's midseason changes, CONERLY was practically clean. The trajectory of that grade, 59 in the first half, 71 in the second, is the real story of this player, not the headline, and now he shows up to 2026 looking physically different. Every photo and video the Commanders have released, whether it's the new uniform shoot or practice clips, shows a CONERLY who looks more compact, more solid, less the athletic young project from Oregon, and more the NFL tackle he was projected to become. The pre-draft knock was always play strength, the ability to anchor when a 265-pound defensive end is coming at you at full speed with a bull rush. His technique was fine. His football IQ was praised by scouts. But that last layer of NFL-level brute strength wasn't fully there at 21 years old. The difference between the guy we saw in September and the guy who shows up to training camp this summer in terms of physical development could be enormous. There's also a coaching factor I think is genuinely underrated in this conversation. The Commanders promoted Darnell Stapleton from assistant offensive line coach to offensive line coach for 2026. Stapleton has a specific reputation for developing young offensive linemen into their potential. That's not a random promotion. That's an intentional decision to put someone in that room whose primary skill is exactly what CONERLY needs for year 2. Last year, the coaching structure around the offensive line was unstable because the whole team was in crisis mode. This year, there's clarity, there's continuity, and there's a position coach whose entire job description is making CONERLY the tackle he can be. PFF named him Washington's primary breakout candidate for 2026. That's not a small media outlet running a feel-good June story. That's the analytics firm that literally every front office in the NFL subscribes to for evaluation data. When PFF says a player is their top breakout candidate on a roster, those of us who follow the numbers closely have to take that seriously. Here's my position, and I know some people won't agree with this. Josh CONERLY Jr. is the single most important player to watch on this roster in 2026, not the most talented. Jaden Daniels is the most talented, not the highest profile. McLaurin and the new additions get more attention. The most important in the specific sense that the upside and downside difference of his season determines what the ceiling of this team actually is. If he comes out in September at a 71 or better PFF level and stays there, the Commanders' offensive line with Tunsil on the left and CONERLY on the right is probably the best tackle tandem in the NFC East. Jaden Daniels gets to live in the pocket, make real reads, and develop into the franchise quarterback this fan base is banking on him becoming. If CONERLY regresses to September 2025, Daniels takes unnecessary hits in a year he needs to be healthy, and the whole offense operates in crisis mode every week. Training camp is where this story gets answered. I'm watching every reps I TT. And to close things out, I have to talk about SONNY Styles. Mandatory minicamp started today, and what's coming out of Ashburn about this rookie is the kind of thing that, if you don't have context, you might dismiss as June hype from a coaching staff trying to build buzz. But when you start stacking the sources, the data, and the specific language being used, the story becomes more convincing than anything I could manufacture. Styles was the 7th overall pick in the 2026 draft out of Ohio State. Linebacker, 6'5", 243 pounds. At the combine, he had the highest vertical jump among linebackers in his class, 43.5 inches, the longest broad jump, a 40-yard dash of 4.46 seconds that tied for the fastest in his position group, with a 10-yard split of 1.56 that also tied for the top mark at linebacker. If you don't understand why those numbers are insane at that size, let me put it simply, a 6'5" linebacker with a 43-inch vertical and a 4.46 is not a real thing. That's a safety who transitioned to linebacker, which is exactly what Styles did, starting at Ohio State as a safety before moving to linebacker for his 2024 season. Now, combined numbers alone don't tell you anything about whether a player can actually play football. The NFL draft history is full of incredible athletes who couldn't translate that to the field. What genuinely convinces me about Styles is the combination of what Dan Quinn said at minicamp today and the production context from his final 2 years in Columbus. In his last 2 seasons at Ohio State, Styles accumulated 182 tackles, 17 for loss, 7 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 1 interception, and 8 pass breakups. That's impact production, not inflated numbers against weak programs. Ohio State plays in the Big Ten, and Styles was doing that against the best offensive programs in the country. But the statement coming out of Ashburn that impacts me most is this. Dan Quinn compared SONNY Styles directly to Jaden Daniels as a communicator on the field. Quinn said Styles is in control in the way he processes and gets calls and checks to his teammates, and likened that to how Jaden commands the offensive huddle. That is not a casual comment from a coach trying to build media hype in June. Dan Quinn does not say things like that about rookies without a specific reason. Quinn is meticulous with language around his players. When he makes a direct comparison between a rookie linebacker and his franchise quarterback in terms of football communication, that's a real evaluation. Jerjan Newton said Styles has adapted to the NFL at a speed that genuinely impressed him. Frankie Louvu described him as a sponge. Defensive coordinator Durante Jones, who runs one of the most complex disguise-heavy systems in the NFC, said Styles is still learning how to be a professional, which is the honest answer, but everything else coming out of that facility points in the same direction. Why does the communication piece matter more than the athleticism? Because athleticism tells you what a player can do physically. Communication tells you whether the coaching staff can actually deploy him in complex situations from week 1. Durante Jones's defense runs on disguise, multiple base formations, creative pressures, coverage shells that change based on offensive motion. To operate in that system, you have to process in real time, recognize the opponent's formation, and adjust your responsibilities before the snap arrives. That usually takes a full NFL season for rookies to even begin understanding. Styles is doing it in June minicamp. Quinn outlined a 3-linebacker package with Styles, Louvu, and Leo Chenal operating simultaneously. He said all 3 have the length, speed, and temperament to blitz, and that being able to bring different people from multiple spots is a massive schematic advantage. Translate that into offensive coordinator language. If you're game planning against Washington in 2026 and your protection scheme has to account for a potential blitz from any of 3 linebackers coming from different alignments, all with first-round athleticism, you're making decisions nobody wants to make at the line of scrimmage. Centers and guards are going to be wrong sometimes. And when they're wrong, quarterbacks get hit. The Fred Warner comparison keeps circulating in the media, and I don't think it's an overreach. Warner came out of San Jose State as a 3rd-round afterthought and became the best linebacker in the NFC for 5 consecutive years. The reason was the same formula: off-the-charts football IQ, ability to communicate and adjust the whole defense, and just enough athleticism to execute once he knew exactly where he needed to be. Styles has everything Warner had, except he arrived as the 7th overall pick instead of a 3rd-round sleeper. If his development arc resembles Warner's even partially, Washington has their defensive centerpiece for the next decade. Year 1, he's going to make an impact. I'd bet on it. That's everything I've got today, fam. And when you put the 3 pieces together, the picture that forms about this roster isn't a lost team trying to figure out what it is. It's a team with a franchise quarterback still on a rookie deal, a GM thinking long-term but acting on the window that exists right now, and individual pieces that, if they take the steps the data says they can take, turn Washington into a legitimate problem in the NFC. Think about what this looks like in September if things break right. Diggs in the slot with McLaurin outside, and Jaden Daniels getting real time in the pocket because Connerly and Tunsil are protecting him like they should have been protecting him all of last year. And on defense, Styles reading the offense before the snap and directing Jones's blitz packages while Chason hunts quarterbacks from the edge. That team exists. It can exist by week 1, but it requires the front office to keep moving. Last year was 5-12. That was painful. I sat with y'all through every loss, and I know how it felt. But the best rosters in the NFL over the last decade share a pattern. A young quarterback still improving, a front office that understands the window and acts accordingly, and key position players who make the leap in year 2. The Commanders have that structure. The question is whether they execute. Raise hail, always. If this video gave you something real today, hit the like and subscribe. And drop it in the comments. Do they sign Diggs or do they roll with what they have at receiver? I want to read every single one of those responses.